All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
So this time we're taking a look at It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work by Jason Fried and David Heinemeier
The
Hansson.
founders of Basecamp.
Exactly. And they're really sort of pushing back against this idea that you have to have this crazy work culture to be successful.
Right, it's like this whole hustle culture thing,
Yeah.
where you're always working late, you're always on, and that's the only way to get ahead.
Right. You got to grind.
Exactly.
So are they basically saying that that's all a lie?
Pretty much. I mean, they
Okay.
made a really strong argument against it.
Okay.
They talk about how overwork actually leads to burnout, poor decisions,
Right.
like reduced productivity.
Because if you're tired, you're not thinking clearly.
Exactly. And they share this story in the book about a project that went way off track
Oh, really?
because the team was just totally burned out.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, right. Everybody's putting in these crazy hours, but then they're making mistakes or having to redo things, and it actually ends up taking longer.
So what did they do?
Well, they actually implemented this rule, like no work after 6 p.m.
Wow, that's pretty strict.
It is, but it actually worked.
Really?
Yeah, because the team was able to rest, recharge, come back refreshed, and they ended up being way more productive.
So they're saying that working less can actually lead to better results?
Exactly. It's about working smarter, not harder.
And I think that's something that a lot of us could probably benefit from hearing.
And I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking I have to work all the time to get things done.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's like this pressure to always be on.
Right. And it's not sustainable in the long run.
No, it's not. And the book also talks about this other big productivity killer meetings.
Oh, yeah, meetings.
Ugh, so many meetings. And, you know, sometimes they're necessary,
Sure.
but a lot of times you just sit there thinking, this could have been an email.
Totally. And Fried and Hansson are really against unnecessary meetings.
Okay.
They actually advocate for something called asynchronous communication.
Synchronous communication.
Yeah, so instead of having all these real-time meetings,
Right.
you use tools like, project management, software, email, collaborative documents.
So everybody can kind of work on their own time and contribute when they're able to.
Exactly. It minimizes interruptions and allows people to focus.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about setting boundaries in general?
That's another key theme in the book.
Like, how do you actually set boundaries between work and life?
Right. Well, they have some pretty specific recommendations,
Like what?
like no work after hours, eliminating that whole ASAP culture.
Where everything's an emergency.
Exactly. And encouraging deep work.
Deep work.
Yeah. So setting aside dedicated time for focused work without distractions.
That sounds lovely.
It is, but it takes discipline.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, how realistic is all of this? I mean, it sounds great in theory,
Right.
but are there certain industries or jobs where it's just not feasible?
I mean, it definitely depends on the specific context.
Right.
But Fried and Hansen argue that setting boundaries is important no matter what you do.
Even if you have a really demanding job.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and energy.
Okay, and I really like this idea that they talk about of a calm company.
Yes, creating a work environment that's actually calm and focused.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, Basecamp is a good example.
Uh,
They have this policy called library rules.
Library rules.
Yeah, so during core working hours, communication is kept to a minimum.
So people can really focus.
Exactly. And they also have a strict policy against working after hours or on weekends.
So they really value work-life balance.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individual boundaries, it's about creating a company culture that supports well-being.
That's interesting because it makes you wonder if more companies adopted this approach, would we see a shift in how we view work as a society?
It's an interesting question. I think it would definitely have an impact.
Yeah, and ultimately Fried and Hansen are saying that success doesn't have to come from chaos and overwork.
Right. It comes from clarity focus and creating a calmer, more humane work environment.
I love that, calm and humane.
Me too. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, so what's one small change that our listeners could make this week to bring more calm and focus to their workdays?
Well, I would say think about whether you could maybe decline a meeting that doesn't really require your input
Okay,
or block off some time for focused work without any distractions.
like put your phone away, close your email.
Exactly. Or even just try leaving work on time today.
Oh, that's a radical idea.
It is, but even small changes can make a big difference.
I think that's a great challenge for all of us.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time.
See you then.